How to Promote Learning for Low-Income Students. Welcome and thank you for coming to my professional development. I'm so excited you guys are here today. Let's start off with some teaching hacks. My favorite thing to do is to learn from other teachers and hear what they do in their classrooms. So do you have a teaching hack you'd like to share?
I think it is important to figure out where your kids are at, like what level they're at, so you can differentiate your teaching from there.
That was a really good one. Jamie, do you have one?
I like to use turn and talk.
Actually, I love that you said that because I'm going to mention that in here and how impactful that can be to the students. So that was a great one. Kaylee?
In our classroom, we do a secret student, so no one feels particularly called out, or if there's a student that struggles with behavior, they don't always hear their name. I can just say, I'm looking for my secret student, and the next day we'll recognize that child if maybe they weren't following the directions, and we'll just say, oh, we'll try again the next day without calling anybody out.
That's cool. I've never heard that. That's a good one. Awesome. So we're going to begin by talking about Title I because as you guys know, we are in a Title I school. So my goal in this professional development is to get you guys to learn more about the students in your classroom and what we can do to help and promote learning. So how can we help? The definition of a Title I school is a Title I school is a public school that receives federal funding to support students from low-income families, aiming to bridge educational gaps and ensure all students meet state academic standards. Awesome. I'm sure you guys are like, yeah, okay, and what's the problem? So the problem with being Title I is we have low-income students that statistically make lower scores. Their homes usually include very little literacy or math, and unfortunately their families normalize having low education, and then it becomes a negative cycle over and over again. So you're probably thinking the same thing I thought. Okay, I heard you say low-income students and low scores, but what does one really have to do with the other? Well, children living in poverty have low academic readiness, and they have less parental nurturance while confronting elevated levels of life stress, increased family instability, and greater exposure to violence. And when a child has that, when they feel the stress, they are literally incapable of learning. Their body's developmentally not ready to do both at the same time, which is what creates the low scores because they're unable to learn. The identified barriers for being low income is their communities tend to be under-resourced, which adversely affects the child's accomplishments. Children in poverty, not all of them, but some of them do experience food insecurity, lack of medical treatment for illnesses, and family and stress trauma. Then children who are in high poverty also show poor cognitive development, language, memory, social emotional processing, and then the school systems in low economic status communities are often under-resources, which unfortunately just negatively affects students' academic processes and outcomes. And then as I mentioned earlier, low-income families tend to be a negative cycle, and what I mean by that is if the parent is working a low economic status job and didn't graduate from high school, typically their student will either do the same thing or maybe go a little ahead, but then if they see their parent working that kind of job, they will follow in their footsteps and work that kind of job too, and it just goes on and on through a cycle as their lives go on. So why this is so important is because these students, guys, they're in our classrooms. And the research shows, and this is an obvious one, that students born into low income in households don't get a choice of where they come from. And then, unfortunately, their academics suffer the consequences. So we, as teachers in schools, we need to be the ones to work together to break those unfair barriers that these low-income kiddos face. And this one is a huge one that I just could not believe. But our low-income families, they will enter school with an average of literacy skills 5 years behind those of high-income students. And then furthermore, as I said earlier, typically they have a higher percentage of dropping out of high school. Okay, we're going to stop right there. I've said a lot. What have you guys seen? You guys have these same kiddos that I have in our classroom that come from low-income families. Have you noticed any of this in your classroom? Kelsey?
I've noticed that some of them will come in very tired and just not being able to focus in a result of that.
Yeah, absolutely. Tiredness is a real one because sometimes their families work third shift or different hours and they'll stay up to wait on mom or dad. That's a good one. Have you seen anything, Jamie?
Yeah, kind of piggybacking off of Kelsey. I see a lot of tired students sitting in the classroom, especially come lunchtime.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's done for.
Yeah, I actually have a student who literally misses my entire beginning lesson because he comes in and sleeps through the whole thing. And it is sad and very unfortunate. Do you have one, Kaylee?
Yeah, I think the hardest is when they're interacting with their peers and you can see the disconnect sometimes with the families that have the resources and the kids with families that don't. They feel sometimes left out or
Yeah.
like they might not have those things that other kids are talking about.
Yeah, true. Now, all that being said, has there anything you guys have done as teachers to assist these students?
I have in the past. I had a child who would come in with shoes that were always way too small, that wouldn't even fit on their feet. So I personally went to Walmart and bought them shoes so they could actually have something comfortable on their feet and something that was safe for them.
That's good. That's awesome. Yeah. You have one? Have you done anything?
Yeah, I think with their peers, I do try and bridge those gaps by finding things that they can relate to their peers with, maybe encouraging them to, find groups of friends that I know they have something in common with, that they can make those connections, but it still can be a challenge.
Yeah, right. Has there been anything you've done?
No, it's something that I definitely should probably try to focus on a little bit more with low-income students.
I'm glad you said that because we've been taught, or at least I know I have, that in our classroom we should treat all of our kids like equals, right? So kind of in your head it's like, they may be low income, but they're earning the same as these kids, and that is true in one way, but the same because they come from different places. It is important that we do things to focus on them and do things for those kids, but I'm very glad you said that. Okay, so that being said, we're going to play a game called the Learning Barriers game, and we're going to see what it feels like to walk in their shoes, having lack of resources. So if everyone put their little booklets and pens behind them. Okay, so you guys we're pretending, putting our memory caps on. We are pretending you are my first grade class, and I'm teaching you all sight words. You are to go home and write the sight words that I provided you. All right. However, you only get a piece of paper. You only get a pencil, and you don't have anything. All right. So I want you guys to write me 5 sight words. Did anyone have a problem with this assignment?
Yeah.
I can't do it.
Why can't you do it? What's wrong?
I have nothing in front of me.
You have nothing in front of you because you may not have the resources. I didn't give you the resources. I just assumed that you had what you needed to write these sight words. Did you have a problem?
Yeah, I couldn't write anything.
Same thing. You didn't have a pencil. You have no writing utensils. And Jamie, I know I didn't give you paper, so what are you going to write this on? And that's the point I'm trying to prove. We have to realize, and actually, I'm going to give you a real life example before I move on. I was doing spelling words last week, as I do every week. And the day before spelling test, I gave everyone a sheet, and they were to write their spelling words in rainbow colors to make it more fun. Each word's a different color. Well, as I'm handing this out, one of my little girls said, "Miss Beach, I don't have crayons at home. I can't do this." And then it hit me. I was like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe I just assumed everyone would have markers and crayons. So what I did for that student is I got out a crayon box and I provided that with her. But that's just an example of how, as teachers, sometimes we assume that these kids have what we expect them to have or what we may have had growing up. Okay, so the next section, we're going to talk about how federal, state, district, and school administrators can help to promote learning and for low-income students in schools. So we're going to start with federal policymakers. According to the National Association of Secondary School Principals, federal policymakers need to motivate well-trained teachers and principals to work and remain in low-poverty schools. And what I mean by that, a lot of young and hungry teachers right out of college, they'll go straight to a Title I or low-income school because they know they're needed. However, when they get there, it's not always the sugars and rainbows they think it is, so then they leave. So federal policymakers really need to work on motivating them and finding a way to keep those high-quality teachers at their schools. They need to provide additional funds, resources, supplemental assistant nutrition programs for low-income schools, such as Title I. Now, I don't know if you guys were aware of this, but our school actually does we are in the supplemental assistant nutrition program. So that's good for us. We do that. With the federal policymakers need to ensure federal funds are divided equally so they get their fair share. Sometimes higher income schools get more because of what they have, but it doesn't need to be like that. They need to make sure we are divided equally. This one is the most important. They need to invest in school leadership, improvement strategies, and programs for low-income families to enter post-secondary education or the workforce. You cannot have a strong school without strong leadership. And sometimes these days they just need a warm body. They just need someone that just graduated from college, but that's not what we need. These kiddos need qualified teachers, qualified school leaders to come into their schools and truly lead them, give them improvement strategies. And lastly, they need to expand the maximum allowance of Pell Grants so they're able to afford more. Moving on, state policymakers. The state policymakers need to ensure state funding is properly balanced. As I said before, sometimes that's not properly balanced because they want to give more to the high income school just because they may have more sports programs or higher scores or whatever. They need to reevaluate state investment in education to be sure low income schools are receiving funds to promote student success, and that is so important. We want to do everything we can to promote that success. They need to invest in a developmentally appropriate curriculum. I'm going to stop right there. You guys know how I feel about curriculums. Sometimes in Title I schools or low-income schools, they simply use a curriculum that might be free because it's free. However, if it's free, it's not always developmentally appropriate. Sometimes it's on a screen. It shouldn't be used. So it's so important that the state invest in a developmentally appropriate curriculum so the students can succeed. It's not fair not to give them what they need simply because they're low income. And lastly, they need to prioritize financial aid for schools based on need instead of merit. I think this is the third time I said this. Sometimes they give it to the higher income or the higher merit instead of giving it to the schools that are in need. District leaders. District leaders need to be sure that the district and school funding have equal access for core education for students in kindergarten through 12th grade. We need to have additional resources so that low-income schools can have a fair chance of success. Now, as you guys saw in my Learning Barriers game, it's impossible to learn if you don't have the resources you need. They need to support teachers and other leaders within the school. I know you guys have felt it as teachers, because I have, but sometimes we're not supported the way we should be. And it's so important that teachers are supported so we can help these kiddos for whatever they're going through. District leaders need to ensure high quality teachers are working in low income schools. High quality being the key term. Sometimes they just need a teacher so bad they just pull whoever, but that's not what our students need. They need teachers who are qualified, who know what they're talking about, to come in and teach them and promote success. And lastly, they need to urge policymakers to reevaluate unfair funding for high poverty schools. I'm pretty sure each slide I've gone over has said something about funding. If this shows you that low-income schools don't get the funding they need. School leaders. School leaders need to instill a culture of growth that shows how to be successful in secondary schooling. School culture is so important. The teachers feel it, and then it goes off on the kids. If school leaders cannot instill that culture of growth, it's going to go off on the kids, and then the whole school is just going to be chaotic and not ready to learn. They need to provide resources and benefits so low-income students know how to succeed with the assistance of outside partners. Examples of this would be like free internet, free breakfast, library hours, lab hours, hotspots, anything outside of the school that the kids need to get their hands on. Provide professional development so that teachers will know how to correctly assist children with trauma, chronic stress, hunger, and other outcomes that could be indicated with low economic living. Provide students with resources to college admissions, financial aid, scholarship discussions about secondary education. This may seem weird because we teach first grade. What does it have to do with anything? Well, obviously, not just elementary schools are Title I, and it is so important that we provide students with this because, as I said before, typically their parents don't go to college. Typically, they may not even graduate high school. So these kids have no idea anything about college. We need to be the ones to provide that information for them. And lastly, Our school leaders need to just ensure that the budget discussions are happening regularly within the school. Okay, I'm gonna stop right there. We've talked a lot about what all the administrators could do, but next we're gonna discuss what we as teachers can do in the classrooms to help promote our kids. So before we do that, I would like to do a turn and talk. As I mentioned earlier, it's one of my favorite things to do. We're gonna talk to each other, and I'm actually gonna sit down and join the conversation, but we're gonna talk about what we can do and what our classroom would look like. So let's start off with our first question. As a teacher, what would you do in the classroom to promote learning for income students? And just talk to each other. You don't have to answer me, but I am going to sit down.
I would say, like, if they are a child who is, having a hard time in the morning, if they're sleepy throughout the day, providing that area for them to rest if needed.
I know in my classroom, and this really more so goes on the second one about what would your classroom look like, but as we talked about earlier, it's a lot of tired kiddos. I have a cozy corner in my room where if a kid's tired, they don't just have to lay their head on their desk. They can feel free to go to my cozy corner and rest and relax because they need that needed sleep.
Something that I was thinking about as you were talking about, the students' lives at home and the access they might not have to the resources they need at home. Maybe being a little bit more considerate when it comes to work that I send home. Maybe thinking about the families that aren't able to help their children, not making children feel guilty when they don't have something to turn in or it doesn't look like the other kids because their parents didn't help them. Try and give them encouragement and not focus on a did or didn't or how well it was done, but just the efforts being put in at home.
Yeah, absolutely. I know I mentioned my cozy corner in my classroom, but the next question is, what would your classroom look like? Do you guys have anything different or special you might put in your classroom because of low-income kids?
I don't necessarily have this, but I would like to have this. I think it would be a good idea to have a bin for parents to get crayons, get books, things that they might not have, like that are typical things that you think a child might have, but they don't have, or parents could feel free just to grab that material, because some parents are embarrassed by what they don't have, and something that they could just grab out the door or wherever.
Yeah, I want to piggyback off that. In the beginning, there's so much about bringing supplies for the teachers, but I feel like as teachers, maybe we should think about how we could actually provide those supplies for the kids. That's a good one. Would your testing look different? This is a trick question. I'm going to let you know.
I mean, ideally, yes, you would like it to, but considering that's not something that's, kind of in our control, no.
Yeah, absolutely. That's right. So because we know each child learns differently, ideally, our tests would look different. Each child learns differently, right? But because it's regulated by the state, just because they're low income, we can't technically test them different. What about your small groups? Your small groups are not state regulated, so how would your small groups look?
This goes back to Kelsey and her
Yes.
differentiation and how important that is, meeting each student kind of where they're at versus just teaching to the whole group.
Yeah.
Making sure that they're each being taught in a way that is applicable to them.
Yeah, I was talking to one of our other coworkers last week, and I was saying, we put kids academically where they are together, but maybe it would be good to put like low income students together just because they have common ground.
Mm-hmm.
And I haven't tried that yet, so it might be something I try soon in the future, but I was thinking about that. Does your small groups look different? Maybe keep them the same?
I tend to focus mainly on the academics, but you're right. I think there are other ways that I could be pairing students. It might be nice to also kind of flip the script and maybe think about the kids that might feel discouraged because they don't have the resources and focus on their strengths and see how they might be able to lead a small group.
Oh,
To kids who don't have those skills yet, just to build a little bit of confidence.
See, that's why I love turn and talks, because I had never even thought about that. That was such a good one. We can learn from each other. That's awesome. You guys had a lot of good ones. All right. So, as I said, we'll move on to strategies we can use in our classroom. This is the most exciting part about my professional development, if you ask me, because I love learning new things and adding them to my classroom. So I really hope you guys get some stuff that you're like, I can put that in my classroom. These are all research-based strategies, and they came from the University of South Carolina Education Department, and they have 8 strategies. So I'm going to read these 8 strategies to you first, and then we're going to go through each strategy and how you can use them and implement them. Okay, so according to the University of South Carolina Education Department, we need to effectively use our data, focus on the fluid aspect of child's IQ, create an atmosphere of hope, ensure classroom success, engage in activities that improve brain processes, ensure that innovation is at the core of teaching and learning, ensuring the opportunities for quality enrichment programs, and include effective use of evidence-based interventions. Now, before I move on, I'm sure you're looking at some of this and you're like, I already do that. And I really hope you guys do. But in doing this, I learned a lot too. So I'm sure there's some things you can take out that you're like, oh, that was really good. Or hopefully there's some things that you already do. So I'm excited to move on and talk about this. So the first one, effectively use data. Now, obviously, it is required of us to have data, so we all already do that. We need to accurately chart the children and analyze subgroups based on their performance, and be sure the children are mastering standards by using rubrics and benchmark tests. Now, we do this when we do our M-class test, right? That's how we are able to chart them based on their M-class and their MAP test. So that's how we take our data. But the one here that I think is the most important is with the student, evaluate the results of the test. Now, I remember maybe in high school, my teacher would go over a test with me, but I don't think, and maybe you guys do, maybe I'm wrong, I don't think I've ever gone over a test with a first grader. But after hearing that and seeing that, I said, actually, do you know how impactful that could be to them? If you pull them over and you're like, hey, I saw you messed up on this right here. If you, and show them how to do it, like, you could better yourself next time and show them how they could succeed. I feel like that would really be so impactful for them. So moving on with the school year, I'm going to attempt this and we'll see how that works. Next, focusing on the fluid aspects of the child's IQ. What this means is the child's thinking, reasoning, and problem-solving ability. When focusing on that, the student needs the ability to rapidly adjust their strategies and thought processes from one context to another. And a great way of doing this is context organizers, graphic context organizers. And I know in my classroom, we use these all day, every day. So I know you guys do too. But now you know that they're a great way to help our students, our low-income students, because it helps them with their thinking, reasoning, and problem solving. And here I just have graphic organizers that are about main ideas and stories, but as you guys know, you can do graphic organizers about just about anything. Okay, create an atmosphere of hope. Before I read this, I hope you guys already do this in your classroom. I know I do, but this is just so important for our kids because we want them to feel love and to feel hope and to feel success. So in order to create an atmosphere of hope, we want to encourage the student. We want to give them reasons as to why they can succeed. We want to be their shoulder to lean on and help them to set and attain goals. And this one is so important because, as mentioned earlier in the presentation, they don't always have that parent nurturance. So that's okay. Let us be those people. Let us be the one they come to and have a shoulder to lean on and help them set their goals. We can help them deliver them life skills education. And then lastly, making resources available, which as you guys saw in our learning barrier games, having resources is a must. And we can be the people that provide those for them. Ensure classroom success. A teacher can ensure classroom success by removing learned helplessness and feelings of inadequacy. Oh my gosh, guys. Who sees learned helplessness in their classroom? I know I do, all day, every day, but we can be the ones that can remove that and give them their feelings of adequacy back. We can cultivate a positive growth mindset through the encouragement and feedback. And lastly, we can create an organized environment in our classroom. Engage in activities that improve brain processes. We can teach the kids as if they're all gifted. Now, I know you guys are probably thinking, wait, we need to teach them based on where their learning needs are, which is absolutely right. You're right. We need to teach them where they are. However, if just in a large group one day, we taught one lesson as if they are all gifted, that gives them the mindset that, wow, look at what I'm learning. Look at what I can do. And that'll make them feel like they can succeed, which we know they can. Use physical activity to reduce stress in the classroom. I do this every day. Every day I do this, and if you guys don't, let you know it works. Do it. I use a brain break after every single lesson. Children cannot just sit there and learn and listen all day. They need to get up, move around, get their body moving, the oxygen in their brain moving. So after every lesson, we do a brain break, and then we sit down, and the kids are ready to learn. And lastly, integrate music, theater, and art in your teaching to build social emotional intelligence. Now, we already do a social emotional lesson, which is awesome. But we can also do some lessons and do them through music or art or theater. And just by doing that, we're building that social emotional intelligence within them. Ensure that innovation is at the core of teaching and learning. The first one says lessons are student-led and research-based. I don't know if you guys have ever done a student-led lesson, but let me tell you, it is the best thing ever. It is so much fun. Sometimes it's chaotic and crazy, but the students learn off each other, they piggyback off each other, and they truly get one another, and it is the best thing ever. I know one time I started the lesson about, all right, we're gonna talk about the moon today, but I'm not gonna mention names, but I want little Johnny here, I want you to tell us what the moon is made of. It went from there. By the end of our lesson, we were talking about seawater animals. So like I said, it was crazy and chaotic as kids are, but it was so much fun, and the children learned from one another no matter what it was we were learning. The second one I have is creating high-impact learning opportunities. You see my picture right here? It's just a science experiment. That's one good way of doing high-impact learning opportunities. You could do a music lesson. You could do an outdoor lesson. There's so many different ways that you could create high-impact learning. The last and most important one in my book is create strong relationships with students. Now, I attempt to do this all day, every day, but my number one time during the class to do this is my morning meeting. In my morning meeting, we are at my carpet, and I tell my friends we are a family. Our class is a family. And during that morning meeting, it doesn't matter that little Johnny over here is low income. It doesn't matter that Susie over here has an IEP. It doesn't matter that little Sammy is a high flyer. None of that matters. In the morning, we are one. We are a family. And we laugh, and we sing, and we talk about the day before and what we're doing the next day. And that is when we truly make strong relationships. So although I'm sure you guys do that throughout the day, I know finding that one time in the day to get together and truly focus on that is really impactful. So maybe if you don't do it, you give that a try. Ensuring the opportunities for quality enrichment programs. What this means, these are programs that are outside of the school curriculum. And by doing this, we can improve language fluency, improve our IQ, and improve other cognitive processes. And as you guys see right here, I have my picture of opportunities for intentional talk in the classroom. Turn and talk is my favorite thing. When they turn and talk, they are learning from one another, and it is so important. Excuse me. Okay, include effective use of evidence-based interventions. We already have interventions in place, as you guys know, but if you didn't know, in North Carolina, a lot of schools do interventions based on in-class assessments, which our school does that, NC Early Learning Inventory, or ELI, and these assessments include reading and letters, and progress monitoring is important to find out how the student is progressing as the year goes on. So during interventions, I'm just saying this in case you guys don't already know this, but during the interventions, not only do they teach them what they need to know, but they do, our interventionists, they do progress monitor every few weeks to see how that child is doing and coming along, in case they need to be exited out of interventions or in case they need to do more learning. So my conclusion in all this is being low in academics because of where you come from isn't fair, nor should it continue to be seen in classrooms. By using these 8 research-based strategies, hopefully we can stop this cycle and help low-income students to succeed. And I really hope you guys learned a lot, and I hope I see you guys using some of these strategies in your classroom this week. I know I will be. But before we end, do you guys have any questions? Kelsey?
So how do you create the student-led lessons? Are these more of on the spot, or do you have something that's already pre-planned? What would you recommend?
So truly you can do whatever you want, but I typically do it at the end of one of our studies. And the moon, like I was talking about, we had been talking about space for about 2 weeks. And then our study was almost done, so then I gave it to the students. I was like, we've been talking about the space, the moon. And I was like, take it away. Tell me something about the moon. And then it went from there. But if you have a minute in your class to talk about whatever, you can do it on the spot. You could really do it however you want. Sounds good.
How can we ensure that we are using developmentally appropriate practices in curriculum? I know that's kind of like because like it is like pre-populated almost for you.
Yeah.
But is there a way that we can like ensure that we are like, I guess, fighting for those developmentally appropriate practices and curriculum usage in our classrooms?
So if you know the curriculum you're teaching isn't developmentally appropriate, I would suggest you go and talk to a school leader about it, because honestly, the school should not be giving inappropriate curriculum, developmentally appropriate curriculum. But also what I would suggest is get a hold of the state policymakers, because they would be the ones in charge of that, and fight for getting a developmentally appropriate curriculum in your classroom. That may not be helpful, but
No, that is.
okay.
Kind of on the same note, what can we do when things feel kind of out of our control, like on that state level? Like, how can we be a voice for these students?
Yes.
So in Raleigh, I know every year they do a protest out on the court steps. I've never participated before, but I do know a lot of teachers that have, and I will do more research on it because I don't have a great answer, but there is, I think it's a day a year that they do that, and I can figure out when that is and let you guys know, but there is a way you can do it, and you can go to Raleigh and step up on that protest and get through it that way.
Maybe even sending letters too, like
Yeah.
to the lawmakers of. I mean, I know just one little voice may not make a difference, but at least it makes you feel like I'm making a difference. Like saying like, hey, this is wrong, and then talking to other teachers in the school about, hey, what do you think about this? Do you mind signing this petition, or do you mind writing a letter and all
Yeah,
mail
a
it in?
petition, that would be good, and mailing it in, and instead of just being you, she had a good point, get a whole bunch of your teachers involved, or your school involved. I feel like the more the better, you know.
Yeah, for
That's
sure.
good.
Any other ones?
Yeah, I have one. So we talked a little bit about creating like a positive atmosphere for those kiddos and that SEL. How do you do that for the kids that like you could tell are just kind of a little bit down? Like I do like affirmation songs in the morning. I don't know if you have like, any other ideas that like you do in your classroom.
So we have puppets, Leo and Sally. Leo and Sally, I think are their names. And we use puppets a lot to recite stories. And a lot of times those stories with the puppets help them when they're, feeling shy and you don't call them do anything. Just, and the social emotional stories that I have in my Cozy Corner, I know you have in your classroom. If you just want to read those and maybe get out some puppets and do like some fun game things with them, that normally pulls them out of their shell a little bit. That's just something I do.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
Okay, before I 100% end, I do have a survey I need you guys to do for me. If you'll just scan this QR code and be completely honest. You be completely honest. Don't say I did everything great, because you're my wonderful teacher friends and I love you. Please be honest. Other than that, thank you guys so much for coming, and I hope you guys learned a lot. I really enjoyed presenting this professional development for you all.
Good job. Very informative.
Yeah, thank you.